Meat. Meat is made of muscles, and we can see the muscle anatomy here. So you have here a pork butt, which is a muscle. I might have actually gotten some different muscles put in here, and we can see the individual fascicles here surrounded by fascia, and there is some fat in there as well. So we can see our individual fascicles, which are going to be made up of muscle fibers, which are a little too small to see from this angle. Within those muscle fibers are the myofibrils made up of actin and myosin, and that right there, that's the protein we want to get by digesting it. But clearly this might be a bit tough to digest all at once. So we are going to want to break this down and get rid of this fascia that you can see, kind of make it so the individual muscle fibers are more accessible. So how do we do that? Well, we could chew it. We could also cook it really fast, and cooking it will melt the fat, and it will also melt the collagen in the fascia, allowing the muscle fibers to be separated when we chew it. And that will allow us better access to the actin and myosin and allow us to digest protein in our stomach. Well, there's a simpler way of doing that that won't involve maybe drying it out and making it a big hunk of meat, and that is to make pulled pork. So we're going to put this whole thing in a mix of acid and heat. The acid and heat will dissolve the collagen and allow it to denature, which will allow the muscle fascicles to separate, and you can actually separate them out without pulling on them like this. When you digest the collagen, they'll fall right apart. This will also allow the individual muscle fibers to fall apart, making it so you barely need to chew it at all. So in order to make pulled pork, we're going to need two things. Well, two ingredients and one cooking vessel, so maybe three things. That would be some pork, which you got right there, some nice tough pork butt. We're going to need some barbecue sauce, which is acidic and also sweet and delicious. And we are going to need a slow cooker. And the first thing I'm going to want to do with this is I'm going to want to cut it down into smaller chunks. This increases the surface area and allows us to cook it a little bit faster. So cutting this down will be our first step. Next, we are going to put the meat in this pot. So let's toss these things in. You notice I couldn't get the bones off of this one, so that's going to be an extra long cook for that. So toss all the meat in the pot and add some barbecue sauce. You can actually also add salsa to this to get a sweet salsa type pork. I want to add just enough barbecue sauce to kind of cover it, most of the way at least, and I'm going to stir this all in. Now clearly my hands have meat on them, so I'm going to wash the spoon and my hands afterwards. So I'm just going to stir that in there, turn the heat up to high, and I'm going to leave this for several hours. You can leave it over the entire workday, so set this up in the morning before heading to work, and then when you get home, there will be great smelling, fully cooked pulled pork ready. So let's do a bit of a time lapse and come back this evening. Well, it's been about 7 hours. Here we have some well roasted, well cooked pork. See the chunks of pork still? Got that big chunk with a bone on it still. I'm going to use this, just a spoon, separate out that bone. So you can see how well the collagen has just denatured and pretty much melted away. But the muscle chunks are still intact. So we're going to need something to separate out the muscle fibers from one another. That's what I choose a potato masher for. So here I'm just going to mash down, and as I do, the muscle fibers will separate. So now you see the individual muscle fibers have separated out in this mixture, causing this to be our pulled pork. Now, depending on what type of barbecue sauce you got, it may be steamy. It may be a little bit thin, so you can thicken that up using some flour or some cornstarch, depending on what you want, and that will stir it in, thicken it up, and bind the fat in there, making it thick enough to put on sandwiches. So there you have it. Muscle function and muscle structure are why pulled pork starts off with a really tough haunch of shoulder and ends up delicious, melt in your mouth, soupy.